This is the Geeky Gamer Podcast with hosts Ken and Bill. We are live at exactly 3 p.m. every single Thursday. Our soundtrack is by all lowercase letters and Mr. Interrupt, as well as Couchfire Media brings all the art media production. Thanks to Aribale Productions for all that other stuff that they do. I'm not sure what it is, and none of us are really. So it's just it's a big mystery, really. This week, we are featuring our guests. We have two guests and one host, David Beckemeyer and John Demato. David, he's a bridge builder, so construction of bringing people together, kind of construction, maybe not building bridges in the real sense, but certainly in the figurative sense of bringing people together. He's the host of Outrage Overload Podcast, and he will hopefully make us have less rage, because all I have is rage in this moment. As a general rule, I just rage inside and out, and I'm triggered by everything. And maybe John will help elevate our brand with some visual storytelling concepts and ideas. So we're going to get deep into both of these subjects and do an interview with both of these guests. What I would like to do first is we usually do this. Is what are you guys drinking today? Are you David?
I'm still drinking the coffee. I've had way too much coffee today. So I was up early.
And I've got John? I've got the decaf coffee, and now I'm going with some water.
Oh, good. Water. That's like
I'm trying. I know, God forbid, right? Drink water.
That's like the nectar of the gods right there. I also have a little bit of water, even though it's pretty empty. I've been dehydrated a lot lately. Let's just dive right in. David Beckemeyer, you have a political podcast. I presume it's political. And one of the things that we do on our Geeky Gamer Podcast is we try not to go into politics at all, so we don't trigger people in any of our games. And every time I bring up podcast, my co-host Bill is like, "You're gonna trigger somebody. What are some of the things that I can do to either should I be worried about that, or is triggering bad or good? What's going on with that?"
Yeah, well. Thanks, Ken. I appreciate it. So I first want to say we're not exactly a political podcast. I mean, this polarization and toxic polarization and outrage media and outrage, so what I call the outrage. Oh, I'm not the only one to call it this, but like the outrage industry, involves politics in many cases, but it also flows into other spaces as well. So we do go beyond just politics. And when we're talking about politics, we're not really talking about issues, so we don't really cover issues on the Outrage Overload show. At least we talk more about, like, how do we talk about politics? How does the way we talk about politics affect us? And how can we better deal with some of that and cope with it and find some resilience when things don't go our way and things like that? So just to kind of clarify that.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, but I am typically the person that, like, Bill wants to say that he's the one that triggers in our games, but I feel like he accuses me of bringing this stuff into it. And we do a role-playing game every Monday about, usually it's horror related, and that's where the Geeky Gamer Podcast concept comes from. And so we're always talking about, because I think there's a lot of politics in games, whether it relates to what's happening in the government or in whatever is going on, whoever's getting canceled, or I can use all sorts of buzzwords to make this go, but there is certainly an etiquette in role playing where we try to preserve the fantasy, and sometimes bringing in some real world stuff can disrupt that fantasy. I'm trying to.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, we've made some of these things so much part of our identity that it's pretty easy to see things the way we want to see them, or to see things with a political lens. Or a partisan lens in particular often, and we've sort of been guided there, right, by basically this outrage industry. But it's also kind of part of our innate psychology. So I do talk to a lot of, people from social sciences, psychology, even philosophy, other disciplines, political science, of course. And media people, and then practitioners in this whole bridge building space. But those scientists, provide a lot of the insights on like what's going on with us and why do we find ourselves, kind of getting caught up in this stuff, getting really riled up about it, and having a hard time, not doing that, or finding a way to sort of live our lives, and still deal with our values and this kind of thing without finding ourselves triggered all the time. And it's really tough. We talk about it all the time, and that doesn't mean that I don't get triggered too and everything else, right? It's such an innate part of human psychology, right?
Do you play any games? I mean, have you ever seen a political game or a video game or anything like that? Or like, have you ever played a role-playing game?
Yeah, I mean, not for a long time. I used to do more of it, and I haven't done as much anymore. So now I'm not a geeky gamer. I'm just a geek, just a plain geek. Not so much a gamer geek anymore. But yeah, and it's interesting that I think sometimes some of these are like metaphors for some of the stuff going on in politics. I think sometimes, right? And it may not, you may not be directly referencing things, but often some of the stuff going on in games, as you say, are kind of political, or they're mimicking, or kind of acting like, or are portraying some of the politics we find in our real lives, I think.
Yeah, but that and in the media as well.
Right.
There's definitely a lot of polarization in gaming, like where I will disagree fundamentally with what Bill is telling me, and he is basically playing the world, and I'm just playing a character. If he's being the game master, and I'm just being the person in the world, there is a lot of disagreements about how rules work in games, because it's fantasy world, and you're running off of a guideline of this is the world that we're in, and these are the physics and of this particular world. Do you think that where we have rule books in games, if we follow the rules, sometimes people say that makes it more fun, and politics and the larger sense of reality, do you think that fundamental is that necessary to have a ground where different figures can be basing their arguments off of a playing field?
I think an interesting way to think about it would be, you're kind of talking about beliefs, attitudes, and values, right? Even if it's in a fantasy world, somewhere that's overlapping, probably. Even if it's in a role playing mode, we still might take the role of someone that has beliefs, attitudes, and values, right? And those things, and the way those things interplay, it goes beyond politics, right? I mean, that can come in any time that when your values start taking a role in it, when your beliefs and attitudes start taking a role in it, then this is when a lot of the same kind of psychology comes out, right? So, if I'm going to convince you of something, and just with the facts, that's not going to get me very far if you've become attached to that belief, right? And now it's kind of part of your values, part of your identity. Then it's going to be harder to if you're just some random fact that you don't have that much interest in, I can probably convince you with the facts. Like, oh no, it's, elephants don't have 3 legs; they have 4 legs. And you'll go, yeah, okay, they have 4 legs. Like that makes sense. I don't, because it's not something you really care about how many legs an elephant has. But if it's something you have, and you may not even know when this has happened, but when it's started to become associated with values, that arguing like that won't really work, right? Those facts are not really how you change your mind about things or come to believe things. And I would imagine in a role-playing game, it would be the same kind of thing, right? You're going to be influenced by the ecosystem. You're going to be influenced by the social relationships of who's convincing you this rule is better than that rule, or here's the right way to interpret that rule, or the wrong way to interpret that rule. And I would imagine a lot of that would come into play, and you probably have debates over that, like you're interpreting the rule the wrong way in this scenario or something like that, and it can start to become something one might latch onto with a stronger held feeling, and then all these mechanisms come in to try to support your pre-decided position on this topic.
Are there ways that maybe you could, like, you clearly try to do this on your podcast? I mean, what do you think is the way to convince somebody to listen to, or at least establish a ground versus a set of value system?
Well, so yeah, I mean, I'm not in the business of persuading on my show, but I do talk a lot about the science of persuasion. So we do talk about that a lot, but I'm not necessarily trying to convince anybody on a particular view. But we do talk about if you want to do that, how would you do it?
Yeah, your show is based on science. It's a very scientific approach to. It's what you say at the beginning of your episodes. I totally interrupted you. I just wanted to add
go
that.
ahead. Yeah. So right. So I mean, when we think about how people come to know things, particularly like I say, if they have now been connected a bit to your identity and to your values, the way you first of all, that we don't even know necessarily when something is that deep, become more of our deeper values and stuff like that, right? This kind of usually is pretty subconscious, and we don't really have necessarily a conscious awareness of it. But when it is something that's polarizing like that, and somebody has taken a position, the first step is just kind of understanding it. And what happens is storytelling and asking questions are the way that you understand it better, right? And if you want to, you can win an argument and lose an argument, right? Like if you might win with some facts, but you lost in actually understanding anything, and there was no mutual understanding between the two parties. And the person that you think you won the argument with probably is just going to go back to where they were before you had a conversation with them. In fact, they might even go there deeper. There's this whole idea of rebounding and things like that you might latch onto that idea even more powerfully, right? Because now you've threatened them, and you've threatened their defense mechanisms and things like that. And again, we don't often know a lot of this is going on, but the kind of conversation that will become more useful is a conversation because usually when we're holding on to one of these beliefs, it's because of some experience in life, right? It's something got us there. So the best way to understand that is to create space for the person to justify their position to themselves. Even though they're explaining it to you, what they're really doing is explaining it to themselves. And then that creates the space for them maybe to question a little bit whether they believe that thing as strongly, or the evidence they have is as strong as they think it is, and things like that. So that's the best way to do it, is really to create space. So I might start with if there's some topic like, something is, we'll go back to the elephant thing, right? So like, how many species of elephant are there, Ken?
I don't know, one. I don't know anything about elephants. All elephants are the same, right?
What if I walk?
So it's a good topic. It's a good topic for that, because you don't really know it, and you don't really care. You don't really care that much whether you know it. So it's a good topic to have this where we won't be, it won't trigger some of that. But if I ask you, okay, so you think there's one species of elephant. So
sure.
How confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10? How confident are you in that answer?
I'm gonna say 1, but that's because I don't have any. I know about the Dunning-Kruger effect, so like I know I'm probably wrong.
Right. So, and then if you were really going to probe that, you might say, well, a 1, why not a 2? Like, why wouldn't you give it a 2? Right. And you can probe that some more.
Because I have very little experience with animals. And I know that when I start talking to experts about this stuff, they're like, you're wrong.
Right. And so this is probably a topic where when you know the fact and you hear the fact and it's like, okay, well, currently the consensus is there are 3 species of elephants, right? That used to be 2, used to be an Indian elephant and an African elephant. Now there's 2 species of African elephants. There's like the forest one and the safari one or whatever, right? So there's 3 species, right? But now that you know that, you probably aren't that upset about it, and you probably go, yeah, okay, I'll try to remember there are 3. I mean, it's not a factor necessarily you care that much about, so you're not going to have some of that emotion tied up in it. But that's the way. Like, if I was to ask you about maybe about a movie, right? Is there a movie you saw recently?
Sure. I think I saw. I've been watching. What is it? The guys in the. It's like an Apple movie. Oh gosh, it's like a tunnel. They're all encapsulated in this. It's like a Fallout shelter.
Oh, Fallout.
Yeah,
Fallout?
But it's not Fallout. It's not Fallout. It's like the Apple version of Fallout, and I can't believe that I watched Fallout recently. That's a good one. Let's go with Fallout. But real quick, Bill is here, and
Hi.
I wanted to ask Bill this: how many species of elephants are there, Bill?
3.
Now he knows 3.
I was gonna say 7. I don't actually know.
One's like the mammoth. And then vaguely in my little lizard brain, I think the.
Well, this was how many species
Indian
are
and
extant,
African.
right?
Yeah.
Not. Yeah. This is how many are around now.
No. Okay.
Right. There's a lot of Thai elephants, but I assume
Yeah,
they're
Thai
Indian
elephants. That's a thing too.
Yeah.
I think they're
don't
all the Indian elephant species, though.
And they're different species of elephants.
Yeah.
Because you know,
there's-
I'm just gonna send us down a hole. What are you guys talking about?
We're talking about disagreements on games. You know, when you have an idea and you're
I'm
the
always
arbiter and
you're wrong.
I disagree with you.
Right. Yeah. That's what you're.
and you wrote the book and I'm just the guy that's playing the game that you made.
Well, you bought the book, so
I did buy the book.
yeah. So I'm behind. Sorry, I had to go to the urgent care. Whatever. Hi, John. Sorry about the
How you doing?
fucking kerfuffle. I blame Google Calendar and God. So.
Those are good to blame. That's fine.
Right. If you're gonna blame someone, he can take it.
Blame God and Google.
I think we should open up the floor to John. How many elephant species are there?
I'm sticking with 3, and I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Nobody likes my one.
I don't know. The last time I saw
I'm
an
going to double down
elephant.
on this. I think there's one species of elephants. If it's got a trunk and the long legs and the hairy ears, it's like they're all related. They're all the same. They all look the same to me.
I don't know. I don't think that's a good way to do it. I'm not a professional elephant person, but I'm pretty sure that's not the way to do it.
Yeah, I'm not either. And species are complicated, right? Because where do you draw the line? And there's different ways of looking at it. There's like the whole genetics and DNA side, and who what the genetic tree looks like. But I think with elephants, a lot of it is the different. Like the African ones, I think have bigger ears and a couple of other things, right? So there are some differences in those species. But it's a fair question as to where they draw the line.
Yeah. Okay. So, why is it that you know about elephants? I mean, it's a good thing to know about them, but.
Well, I only picked that as a topic that no one probably has a real strong opinion on. But
Right.
now I find out that Ken does have a strong opinion on it.
Ken does. He's got
I'm
a strong
surprised
opinion about
that.
everything.
Yeah, but that was kind of the idea that you
Arbitrarily strong one at that.
Yeah. The idea was kind of about you're not really going to convince people with facts normally, right? You're going to want to give a person a space for an issue for which they have strong emotional ties. So it's something to do with identity, it's something to do with morality, these kind of things, values. Then it's much harder to change anybody's mind by just dumping more facts on them. And it just basically doesn't work. I mean, all the evidence, which now I'm being super ironic because I'm telling you the evidence says you can't convince someone of something with evidence. So I don't know. Maybe now we're in a loop and we can't get out.
Well, there's definitely an idea here. I mean, at face value, I see no problem with that. To play a little semantics, okay? I think it's important to know what the definitions of the words we're using are. So, for example, convince. What's the goal, right? So, like, if I say, well, I'm trying to convince someone, does that mean I'm trying to change their mind so they adopt what I'm saying? Does it mean that I'm just trying to win a debate? Like, where are we going with that goal?
Well, and that's a great question because, like, in my case, I've never people. I'm always trying to tell people, like, you're not. It's a bad objective to have to try to change people's mind anyway, right? Like, that's just if that's your objective when you go into a conversation, particularly with a political adversary, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure right away. So I'm always about trying to have both sides understand. But yeah, what often happens is people, come to the show, they talk to me, but they reach out, they say, this person is wrong. Tell me how I can convince them that they're wrong, right? Tell me how I can show them they're wrong. And that's what people often want to do. And obviously I try to dissuade them of that and say, that's a bad approach. Like, you don't want to do that. But if you wanted to, like, there are people that are in that space, right? Like canvassers and things like that really are at least trying to see if people have some flexibility or movement from a position, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10. Will they move from a 5 to a 6 or 7 to an 8 or something like that? And so there are people that have that as a motivation that they're kind of, but and if that's, for those people that think they're going to, so many people come to me with this idea that think if they just go pull the right facts for the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and 3 other places, if those people see those facts, they will, come to my way of seeing it. And a lot of what we talk about on the show is that's not how people come to conclusions. There's a lot of interpretation of those facts. There's questions about the source and reliability of those facts. There's, like I say, these values and other things that come into it that might cause you to reject facts. There's this thing called knowledge resistance. So all these factors play in. So anytime you have that objective, like I'm going to somehow just convince this person, that's kind of a wacky way to look at. I mean, it's kind of not the best way to look at the world anyway. But if you want to leave space to understand somebody better, it's these kind of conversations that if to have you change your mind in any way at all, I can't change your mind. Only you can change your mind. So if you even want to have a little bit of that, like I just want to understand them better, maybe allow them space to see how confident are they of their position, things like that. This idea of having them explain to themselves why they feel the way they do. And there's 2 aspects of that, right? Like if I ask you, what did you like, what was the movie we said it was? I forget now. What was it? Fallout. Did you like Fallout? I mean, the answer to that is right at the front of our brain. It's a yes or no. Super easy, right? I'm just blam, it's right there. But now if I say, okay, you like it. So on a scale of 1 to 10, do you like it? That brings a different part of your brain into the conversation, right? You'll notice people when you ask them that. You'll see them do things like, they'll kind of turn their head. They'll go, let me think about that, right? Because it is engaging a different part of our cognition to now give it that rating on some kind of scale, just kind of invented scale.
John, what do you think about this?
What do I think about? I'm with you. I think,
and you're in the business of persuasion too, right?
Well, I mean, I'm in the business of authenticity. I'm in the business of capturing people in a way that they want to be seen by those that they work with, that they serve. And, capturing natural moments, capturing recreated moments, and being able to use these images in a way that helps attract the types of people that my clients want to work with and that those people want to work with. So it's not exactly the same type of conversation as persuasion, but there's definitely a level of maybe there is, I guess, a little bit of persuasion in the sense of it's attraction more than persuasion, I think is how I would put it.
I would love to persuade people to listen to our podcast and buy my book. So, or attract them to doing it. I attract them to hit the subscribe button. So, I'll poke a little bit at that. Because I'm not a marketing guy, obviously, or a very persuasive person either.
But that's why I win all
in
the
my
arguments.
mind, that's right, because he's the pretty one. So what I'm trying to get at is,
you're both photogenic. Stop it right now. I don't have time to therapize the both of you.
it sounds very similar. Yeah, it sounds like exactly the same thing to me. So how is it different? What you're doing versus debating, I suppose.
Well, in the case of what I do for my people, they're not trying. I guess they're trying to win business. There is that, but the other way to look at it and to reframe it would be for them to attract the types of people that they want to have a long-standing relationship with, and be able to, help them with whatever it is that's holding them back. Because, I work with people who speak on, aside from writing books, they speak on stages and they train and coach and consult. And ultimately, they're all in the business of transformation in one way, shape, or form. So the goal for their image content is to be able to bring in the attention from those that they not only want to work with, but the people that are qualifying whether or not they are the right expert to work with, that they can stomach that person long enough to actually learn from them, to learn how to get past their problems and to be able to move forward and be a better person in one way, shape, or form.
In general, how would you accomplish that? I know it's different for everyone, but is there like a general rubric that you follow?
Yeah, there is a very lengthy strategy call that I do with clients. And even if it's not for their branding photography, the branding photography are the headshots and the wider portraits, the stuff where they're looking into the camera. Right. And then, when they're on those stages or they're in front of the room, those are the candid photos. But regardless of whatever the scenario is that I'm photographing, there is a lot of strategy beforehand, and there's a lot of intention behind what we're doing, because we don't just show up, snap a couple of photos, and hope for the best. I'm uncovering who they are as a person, who they serve, the problems they solve, and how they solve those problems. And from that, I then work with them to create a list of different types of images that make the most sense for them to put out into the world to represent all of those important details with regards to, what they're in business for and their expertise.
So it's kind of like curating their brand.
It is. It's enhancing it. It's putting a spotlight on it. It's all of those different things. It's a mixture of showing them looking like the superhero that they are, while also being a relatable and relevant human being that someone can actually have a real conversation with. So it's that careful mixture. And there is a bit of curation in that for sure.
And how do we curate the brand? This is I'm running off. How do we curate the brand for coming up with and this is sort of for both of you guys, having a ground and conversation for and we should we? I mean, is there is regulation for journalism or regulation for content? Is that bad or good? Either one. Or is that, is that a bad question?
Regulation regulation is always challenging, right? I mean, because what kind of regulation and what are we talking about and who, and I think there's always room for or I shouldn't say always, but there's often room for some kind of regulation, and it's always one of those, where do you draw the lines, and that kind of thing, right? And in the U.S. we certainly have certain kinds of things in the built into the Constitution that can sort of limit or challenge some of that. Plus some of our culture challenges some of that. But there often can be room. I mean, there are regulations in almost any industry, whether you know it or not. There probably are some. Certainly, there's the whole can't shout fire in the theater or something like that. I mean, there's those kinds of things. So there's almost always something out there. But yeah. But it's a fine line, like how far do you take it, right? I've certainly, after doing this show and talking to all the experts I've talked to in this space about, media, and even though many people are really, burnt out or frustrated and think social media is just an evil thing, they still don't believe we should do a lot of regulation about it, right? They're very careful about anything, particularly anything related to sort of First Amendment type stuff, or that kind of thing. So after talking to all the folks I've talked to, I become, more of a supporter of the free speech stuff, and that you have to let people say things you really don't want anyone to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, for instance, we're getting ready to experience just a massive regulation in this country. TikTok is on the verge of getting regulated out of existence, or at least here in the States. I don't personally have one, but I kind of feel like that's where most people get their information from. Do you think that is something that, I mean, and it's not something that the incoming administration can do anything about, because it's set to happen the day before the outgoing administration is going out? Or do you know anything about this? Is this too specific?
I have looked into this, and I do have opinions about it, and I've also talked to a lot of experts about it. In terms of the specific what it can or cannot do, I mean, for the one thing, it's probably going to get appealed and it'll be pushed back. It's my hunch. Secondly, but I could be wrong, never know. And secondly, I think the incoming president could push to change some of those rules, and it's particularly if it's kind of delayed. But I'm frankly in favor of the way they're talking about the requirement of breaking out ByteDance, because that's basically Chinese propaganda, right? And that there are laws about foreign entities controlling media like that, right? And that is a different thing. So it's not and again, I realize that there's a practical challenge there, that getting rid of ByteDance, kind of like there's not a lot of options for them, but I'm in favor of it, because ByteDance is basically Chinese propaganda. It's teaching everyone that the Chinese way is better, that their style of, it's not even the communism part so much as the dictatorship part. It's fine. Everyone's happy. And that's what they're creating, a whole world of people selling that propaganda. So I'm in favor of it. Like, I'm in favor of getting ByteDance out of it. And another thing is there's misperception from Americans, particularly, that maybe people in the West in general, that a private entity in China is a thing. Like, there really is, I mean, or at least has the same meaning as it would have in, say, Europe or the U.S. It doesn't, right? I mean, the CCP is involved in control of everything, especially something with that much power and influence. So, for me, that's a thing that I support. Now, am I right? It's not a position I would promote on my show necessarily, because, like I say, we don't really talk about issues on my show. But for me personally, yeah, I'm in favor of it, because I think ByteDance is obviously Chinese propaganda.
Well, their curation is on point.
Yeah.
John, what do you think about this specific topic, and essentially the question that Ken was asking?
Well, to be honest, I haven't really thought about it much at all. In the sense of TikTok, because I've never touched the platform in my life, so I don't really know. But in terms of regulating content, I'm of the opinion that you don't have to read something that you don't like. My algorithms for all of my platforms are exactly the way that I want them, which is pretty bland, other than the people that I follow. I don't have anything on there that makes me outraged in any way, shape, or form, and that is by design, and that is the choice that every single person in this country can make right now, should they choose to do that. And, you know, regulation is important. Go ahead.
It seems like your content is very compelling. I'm looking at some of your images that you create, and they're inclusive, mm-hmm. and they're really sharp and interesting. And it's like, you know, you find smart people, and I know a lot of smart people who don't know how to present themselves, and it looks like you do a really good job of kind of creating a package for them to put their best foot forward. It's to me, it's very commercial, which is kind of the opposite of what Chinese. I mean, I'm not an expert on China. Bill would be a better. He would have more knowledge on this, but I mean, certainly, and it doesn't even relate. It doesn't even go into the system but I think it's really beautiful content, and it's definitely compelling.
Here's a question: when you're helping these people essentially build a brand, and if I'm not using the right nomenclature, please correct me. Mm-hmm. Just as I understand it, so you're helping them build a brand, right? To target their audience and present themselves in the way they want to be presented, right? To market themselves.
Yes.
Okay. When you're doing that, do you regulate?
Oh, do you pick your clients? You curate your clients?
Yeah, and do you
I know how to curate my clients? But...
Do you say, hey, look, you can't do this, don't do this, don't say this, blah, 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 blah?
Well, they don't speak in photos, so that part, no. But in terms of, there are definitely some no-go zones in terms of the body language, or more importantly, the regulation piece comes in when they want to pretend to be something that they're not.
Like what?
Like as an example, in the spaces that I work, there are a lot of coaches out there that'll take photos that. One of them that drives me crazy is they'll grab like a bunch of confetti, throw it in the air, and then the photographer takes the photos, and they're like wildly smiling and happy, and it's just this really contrived type of scenario. And that's just one. Yeah, it's stupid. I just think it's stupid. And that's personal. It's a personal opinion, but at the end of the day, it doesn't represent who they are, and it doesn't represent how they help people. So, and it's not really, and it's an exaggeration of an aspect of their personality. It's just silly to me. So those kinds of things we X out from jump.
So if I have a white supremacist tattoo, and that's really who I am, how are you going to handle it? Are you going to let me show the tattoo, or are you going to not?
That's a cool. I like that question. Well, in that case, so for me, I stay away from people that are on the polar ends of the personality and societal spectrum. So I wouldn't even touch that. That goes both ways.
Yeah, I think it's the business. Like you're a business guy. And you're in the business of inclusivity. You want the most people. You want to offend no one. You want people to be compelled to work with your clients from across the spectrum. I mean, and you know, if you peer into the business world, it's kind of interesting to me because we're almost working with two different worlds. David's world is kind of completely different than John's
it's
world.
Kind of dark.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. So it's like, but I think you're both actually having the same conversation about how do we include both sides? How do we, not both sides, but how do we include everybody? Because, I'm a filmmaker myself, and I take a lot of photos. I'm in Kentucky, which is crazy. And I often have to work with people who are absolutely ideologically different than me. And what I need to do to make a living isn't necessarily it goes against maybe some of my political beliefs.
And by the way, I work with, put it this way, I don't actually know, let me rephrase, in some cases, I do know where some people stand ideologically with regards to their personal life, and it actually is bled into some of the work that they do. But it doesn't matter, because it's not about that their beliefs necessarily. It's about their personality and their essence beyond that of a label. And that's what we focus on when we do work together. And they never ask me, who I voted for, what I believe on this topic or that topic. There's no arguments about any of that, because ultimately, I don't care what they believe, as long as they're a good person and as long as they respect me and we do the work that is valuable and useful for them, and they pay on time. All that matters.
Money does talk.
Well, I wouldn't put it, I shouldn't have probably said it that way, because it's about the people. It's about the person.
Sure.
I come from New York City. I have been around every type of human being one could possibly imagine for my entire life. So the way that I qualify someone, it has nothing to do with what they do when they vote or what they believe in or the cultural conversations that they engage in, because ultimately everybody lives here and we all live together, and it's really whether or not you're a good person or not. And it may sound naive and it may sound very simplistic, but the truth is, that is really what how I qualify people, and everything else is secondary. Now, if it's something where it becomes an agenda or you're trying to push something upon me, well, then it's not a fit, and I'm not going to work with that person anyway. So I really don't care.
It's interesting. I do these man on the street interviews where I just listen. I don't push back or argue with people or try to change their mind or anything like that. I just kind of try to figure out where they're coming from in terms of like their media consumption, things like that. And it's interesting. I never ask what their political affiliation is or that kind of thing, but people seem just compelled to tell me anyway. Like almost, I don't know if there's been any case where a person hasn't been compelled to tell me, even though, like I said, I never ask. So it's a kind of an interesting thing. I wanted to, I disagree with John about one thing he said that I kind of want to get out there, both as a former tech guy and as somebody that now, studies these algorithms with social sciences, scientists, psychologists, and others, and folks that actually collect data from these platforms. You said something about how a person can choose to have a feed that doesn't have outrage-inducing content. And that's not true. I mean, all the evidence has shown yours. You may get away with it. You may be one of the lucky few that this doesn't seem to be there. But even people that just set up an innocuous random account, or even bots that set up an innocuous random account, will be fed that content soon, like quickly, because that's the content that the platforms know will get them engaged, and potentially they click on one, they'll just give them more. So it's not true that we can curate our feed. We actually can't with these platforms.
Well, regardless of that, then I guess I'm the smart one that doesn't really give a shit. So I guess we're okay on that.
Yeah, you can do that. You can decide not to engage, but people are getting that content.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on my Facebook feed trying to curate it to not, because I've been involved with politics for years. I can't even open Twitter because it just doesn't. It doesn't. It seems like Instagram.
YouTube is pretty bad too.
Yeah, YouTube is like, our audience is 100% male. 100%. I mean, because we talk about what we talk about, geeky games. We talk about, even though our guests are typically, maybe not this episode, but we have a relatively diverse guest list. I think YouTube, Twitter, they definitely, they're male. Do you encourage, this is for you, John, do you encourage do you give them advice of where they need to be social on social media, or is your stuff more for corporate, more for do you help with social media, or is it outside of
it goes it goes everywhere. It goes on social, it goes on different they're a part of associations or different groups, so it goes to the not the rented land of social, but those home bases of the different places in which they serve, and on their website. But
so
I
you
do
have
help them with
different
their
audiences.
social.
Your audience is different, just on a like a fundamental level in a lot of ways, I would say.
For the most part, I have, I can't remember any. Yeah, it's basically business owners and B2B, B2C, that type of stuff. It's not, general everywhere kind of thing. Yeah.
And David, I think your audience is for people who, I mean, when I was looking at your, and I really do enjoy your YouTube feed. I mean, you have such wonderful, like, I wanted to get triggered by your content. So it seems like your output is fundamentally different. There's calls to action. There's you're using that. The hate next door is one of the titles. The titles you have on your content are wonderful. And there's like I expected to get into like some, like, we're going to get them kind of content. And then you lay it out and you're like, no, we're taking a very scientific approach to understanding this topic on the why such thing exists. Do you think that's an effective way to sell your product? Because you're kind of doing what you're kind of against at the same time. Does that make sense?
Well, you're doing the opposite of it to a degree, right? So, like, many marketers will tell you, you want to create polarizing content, not necessarily politically polarizing, but just polarizing topic that somebody will have a strong attitude about, right? That's what a lot of marketers say, and obviously there's a whole, as I said, the outrage industry, the outrage machine. People call it different things, angertainment, rage machine, all this kind of stuff. That is, a technique that people use. I mean, there's a ton of these kind of YouTube channels out there that's their whole thing, is to sort of to take advantage of that, leverage those aspects of it. And I'm doing the opposite, right? I'm the calm voice saying, I'm doing what you're doing, John. I'm sort of saying, don't click on this stuff, ignore the stuff, and step back for a second, maybe even tune out, maybe even disengage off of social media for a while. Things like that. You can take breaks. So I'm giving people practical tools, using critical thinking skills, and talking to experts that bring in these kind of practical skills, even, basic stuff that, often, even if it's, as a neuroscientist and other scientists will talk about things that you might think are sort of quaint or they're just placating me kind of thing. But these things do matter. Things like, the mindfulness stuff, things like gratitude, things like, taking a step back and letting reactivating your slower part of your brain, things like that those things actually do work. I mean, do have an effect, right? And even even things like making a list of the things that you find that support your values in life, things that make you feel good and support the direction you want to go in, and doing more of that and not doing the other stuff that's not on that list. Things like all those things can really help you create more resilience to some of these negative outcomes that are going to happen in our lives, right? I mean, people that you would like to win an election don't always win. The bills you want to get passed don't always get passed, and we have to be able to deal with that. And also our friend networks. I mean, I think a big driver for the show was people losing friendships over the 2016 election, and people losing friendships over COVID lockdowns and just vaccines and stuff like that. And so just becoming more. Sort of making decisions about whether that is important enough in your life that you want to lose friendships over that stuff. Because almost everybody has stories like that, right? Where they've made something a morality or a value story, and they're disassociating with longtime friends, family members. Everybody seems to have Uncle Joe doesn't come to Thanksgiving anymore kind of stories. And is that really the way you want to live your life? And is there a better way to deal with Uncle Joe than just not letting him come to Thanksgiving anymore? And so that's the kind of stuff we talk about a lot on the show.
So John, how would you, off the cuff, help promote his audience? Or
promote David to his. I was just thinking. I'm like, David sounds like someone that I'd be working with. I like this.
There you
go. Well, aside from the YouTube channel that David has, I would want to know more about what else he does about, with regards to his topic in terms of. Actually, I'm going to ask you, since you're sitting right there, my friend.
He's right there.
I know. Aside from the YouTube channel, is there some other type of work that you do related to this outrage topic that you speak about on the channel?
Well, the YouTube channel is a little bit of it doesn't get the care and feeding it should. It's just kind of there. Because again, I'm kind of a solo on this. I have a few volunteers that help me a little bit, and I have some collaborators that help me here and there, but I'm pretty much doing this all on my own with limited budget. So I've had to cut back a little bit, things like social media presence, right? So I mean, I have the presence, but I'm not really giving those a lot of care and feeding. The YouTube channel has been lower on the priority, Instagram a little bit more, but even that I've cut back. So I mostly just have my website and a newsletter that for people that want to subscribe, and then it's just the podcast platforms themselves, right? So whatever SEO. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. Pretty minimal.
So you're a content creator. You're not like speaking somewhere on this. You're not training anyone on this topic. It's all about the content. Is that correct?
Primarily, yeah. I mean, I am a certified moderator with a group called Crossing Party Lines, but it's not really a promotional thing for this show. It's more of an educational thing in general, learning how to communicate and deal with challenging conversations.
Is this something that you could see yourself doing beyond that of just creating content and actually being in a room and moderating these different types of conversations in a coaching capacity or a consulting capacity?
It's certainly, like I say, since I am a trained certified moderator, I technically am qualified to do that, and I even potentially would offer it, but it is a matter of hours in the day. Like I say, it's a lot of work to put out this show. I mean, there's a lot of research in this show. Each episode is hours and hours of research because I'm reading research papers, I'm reading books, I'm trying to understand the topic, and then I'm going and finding experts that either wrote that book or wrote that paper. So there's a lot of hours of work into just producing my content. So it is yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is room to do more somewhere, maybe even hire people to do more, right?
I think that's a really interesting point, John. I think that a speaking tour of something of what David's doing. I think that there is so much polarization in this country. It seems like that is certainly a world that we could get back to on the same space. I know that there are a lot of people in my community that are violent, worried about violence and being like absolutely terrified of what their political rivals are, from wanting to leave the country to wanting to wage war on their fellow citizens. So I feel like if we could glitz and glamour up some of what David is talking about, bringing people together and having that, I feel like that's a community service right there to get us back.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, though, that's a whole other job outside of creating the content, and that's, But I was just curious, because a lot of creators, well, first of all, a lot of my clients have YouTube channels, and they leverage it as a vehicle for promotion for the other things that they do. So I was just curious, but even if we were to just
from a former tech world, former tech life in the tech world. So I'm retired from that kind of thing. But, and it is funny too, because like you're talking about doing a service or something like that. And we're talking about people wanting to move out of the country. Like as a side gig, I mean, not intentionally, but just like listeners and other people contact me. I am that guy talking people off those ledges like all the time nowadays. And who would have thought if someone that knows me well 10 years ago would have saw me doing this now, they'd be like, what? You were the guy out there in Twitter fights all the time, right?
And then how did you?
And I would be that same person, by the way, too. But age has calmed me down considerably in nowadays. But yeah, I completely get that.
Yeah, John, I want to hear what you were saying. You were about to tell David something about his YouTube channel.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm just spitballing here, but I mean, if I were to, because I haven't just worked with a pure content creator before, but visual storytelling applies to anyone that's trying to, build an audience. In the way that I use it, it's for the service-based business owners, but visual storytelling is not, that in that one domain and that's it. What I would say is, if you wanted to jazz up the website and get some yes and type of visual assets to help, add some pop to what your home base looks like, you talked about doing the research and talking with different experts and the different pieces that go into putting together this program, these episodes. What does that look like? Where are you working? What types of tools are you using? When you're shooting your videos, what does that look like? What's the behind the scenes? Get imagery of that kind of stuff, and it paints a much broader picture of what you're doing for people, and it gives them that fly on the wall experience of you putting together the content that they're consuming, and it could lead to an opportunity to build a larger audience.
Sure. Yeah.
Of course, I'm tacking on extra work for you, but I'm just saying, the question was asked, so I figured that is what came to mind for me when thinking about that for you.
That's a thing with we'll call it content creation. It's the same thing with art or anything that. If you are a creator. So I'm in Los Angeles and I'm an actor. And I went to...
really, which taxi company?
Exactly. They don't use taxis anymore, man.
Oh, that's true, yeah. That's true. I know LA has totally changed by Uber, man. Like, there's no way you could not have a car in LA in the old days, right?
Well, you were close. He bartends, so...
yeah, there you go. Okay. I should have said that, like which bar.
And I turned trick, I was at my class last night, and one of the things we do is you say, hey, so how's everything going? Can you guys give me some feedback? And kind of do what John was just saying, but just from a perspective of people that are also as blind as you are. But it's good. Groupthink is the idea. Groupthink's the wrong word. Just go with me here. My point is this. So when I am given, hey, Are you on this network for auditions? Have you gotten these $500-$600 headshots? Have you done this? Have you done this? There's an overwhelming element to that. Oh, have you gotten on the social media? Because as an actor, you are your brand. As a podcaster, you are your brand, right?
Yep.
And if you get on Instagram, it in and of itself is a business. Twitter, to actually make use of it, it in and of itself, you cultivate an entirely new thing. And here's my opinion. I hate these things. It feeds on my energy and my brain, and I am lost. There's always more to do. And even if it sounds like a good thing to do, I'm like, I don't know, like executive dysfunction all the way, because you get that fire and you're like, all right, I'm going to post on Instagram, and you do, and nothing happens. No, you just got to keep it up. It's like, and then this thing tells me
3 reels a day.
Exactly.
Yeah, but but we create how many hours of content a week? 9 hours easy, with countless numbers of shorts, and we've run out of ability. Like, we could post to all of the things constantly, and it's
you need a plan. You got to have a plan, and you got to have. I mean, it's a business plan, right? So that's why I think, John, what you're saying is invaluable, because it's like a financial advisor almost, except for marketing. Like, you can do everything, but you don't need to do everything.
Yeah.
Right. You can.
But one thing you also have to keep in mind is, when you are your brand, it's never ending. And
you know who needs your...
Oh, go ahead.
He's saying, I need you, but go on.
Bill needs a good headshot. He needs he needs to figure out who he is. He needs he needs to, John, for his actor persona, he needs it.
John, please continue. Can't stop shilling me.
No, it's good. It's good. I mean, you always do. I used to shoot actor headshots. Once upon a time, before I started doing all this other stuff, I started off shooting headshots in that room right over there in my living room. I still have the tape on the floor where I used to put the lights and where the person used to stand. And then eventually I lost my mind because it was a factory of faces, and I just got very tired with it. And that's when I expanded and started working more with people who have more diverse needs, and it kind of satisfies my creativity while also monetizing my art in a different way. Because at the end of the day, yes, this is, to keep the lights on, to be able to pay for this microphone, to pay for the camera that's shooting me right now, but ultimately I am an artist.
Right.
And
that's what keeps you going.
And yeah, well, absolutely, it's what keeps me going. I mean, my clients' expectations, their ceiling of their expectations are my floor, and it's something that does keep me going on to constantly get better and get better. But you had mentioned earlier, actually, I think Ken mentioned it about the nobody pays attention, or no, oh no, you did, about Instagram. Here's the thing. When it comes to my world, you can play one of two games. Either A, you play the, I want to be an influencer and I want 20 million followers and I want to sell them all a bunch of things and just be far and wide but very narrow in terms of scope of audience. Or you can leverage social media as a place where people come in and qualify you, in terms of they found out about you through a friend or a colleague, and now they want the same type of help. And then, where are they going to go? They're going to go to your website, and they're going to go to your social. They're not just going to go sight unseen off of a referral. So in that case, your website and your social media is basically there as a testament and social proof to everything that their friend said to them about you, and they can check you out for themselves. So the numbers do not matter in that case. They don't matter at all. My engagement numbers in the grand scheme of the social media world is horrendous, but I'm doing just fine. And that's all that matters to me.
You can show John my Instagram, the Outrage Overload Instagram, to show like, oh, here's all the things that you shouldn't do. John can tell me all the things I shouldn't do.
It's an interesting perspective, because I think a lot of people, I mean, they've come up to me before and through casual conversation, whatever, and they'll say, oh yeah, I was down at the cafe or whatever and talking to someone. Boom, I looked at their Instagram and they had 20 million followers or 2 million followers or whatever. And that is like a social credit, as in that number, that populism, right? The popularity contest is a thing. Right. On YouTube, I'm sure you guys watch YouTube. Do you guys watch YouTube?
Every night.
Yeah. So you're sitting there, and how many times have you heard like a commentator or whatever be like, oh yeah, this guy and their channel, they have like 3 subscribers. As though 3 subscribers matters, and it does. It's interesting what you're saying there, that there's kind of 2 ways to look at it. You can be an influencer way, or it's almost like a calling card way. Like, is this guy legit? Yeah. Is this his focus? Yeah. If your focus isn't YouTube, then you don't really need a ton of subscribers. It's interesting.
No. Yeah, because for my now, obviously, if you're a content creator and you're streaming to YouTube and you're doing
probably one more
Twitch
subscriber
and all this, that's a different game.
That is
a totally different game. Yeah,
I have a YouTube channel. One subscriber at a time.
let me make you both feel better. So I have a YouTube channel, and I think I have 112 subscribers. I stopped posting a while ago, but I was posting stuff related to the people that I work with, and actually, it was for photographers. That channel was for photographers. I put up a personal and those things are averaging like, 15, 20, 40, 60 views, stuff like that, really low. I posted a video about a sneaker project that I photographed. I'm a New Balance 574 guy. I have 22 pairs of sneakers, right?
Lord.
And I shot all 22 pairs around my neighborhood in New York City and created a website for it and all this other stuff, put a video together for it, and that has like 1,100 views. Still very low, but relative to the rest of the channel, it blows it out of the water, and it has absolutely nothing to do with what I do for a living. So at the end of the day, for me, I just have it up there as a place for people to find me, because you never know, in my world and the people that I serve, you never know where someone is going to come across you that could potentially hire you for help. So it's just good to have it broadcasted across different channels.
And that's I think a lot of the reason why I do this podcast. It keeps my skill level at a certain place, whatever that is. I don't know, but it's the act of doing. But it's getting content out there isn't necessarily as important as meeting you guys. You guys are really why I do this. It's not about getting a ton of views. That would be nice, but we're not in that headspace. My entire client, where I make my money, it has nothing to do with social media, yet all of my money comes because people are doing social media.
Yeah. It's the necessary, truth be told, I can't stand posting 5 times a week. I write 3 blogs a week, 13 a month. I do social posts 2 times a week after week. I've been doing it since 2017. It is a lot of writing, but I've reframed that stress in my mind and the frustration of not wanting to do it by simply saying to myself, you know what? I I can work out ideas and iterate how I can describe how I solve people's problems. So that's what I'm really using the content for on my end. And then on the client end, they see that and say to themselves, oh, he doesn't just show up and take pretty pictures. There's depth to this. There's intention and strategy behind it. This is the type of person that I want to work with, because experts hire experts for a reason. So I'm just there to, be plugged in and be a collaborator and help them, with their goals. And social media happens to be the way to do that. And it's also a way to maintain relationships in the long term. Once these people are done with me, it's not like they disappear and I say goodbye and I never talk to them again. I'm following them on the channels in which they engage most. Before I said, yeah, be everywhere, and that's good because you never know. But there's always primary platforms that these people hang out on. So for me, I'm on LinkedIn a lot of the time. Because that's where a lot of my people are. But I'll have stuff on Facebook, I'll have stuff on Instagram, and I have stuff on YouTube as well.
So, David, your podcast seems to be like a labor of love. Am I correct about that? It's something that you don't intend to try to make money off of it. I'm sure it would be nice, but your goal for your podcast is to inform and vent, I think, a lot. And you see an issue with the world, and please stop me when I'm wrong, because I'm often wrong. You see an issue that needs to be talked about, and you cover that, even though there's not necessarily a drive to find it. Or do you feel like there is?
Yeah. So certainly, the fact that I'm retired gives me an opportunity to pursue something where I don't have to make sort of monetizing it or becoming an influencer or any of those objectives part of it, right? As you say, it's kind of an impact podcast is the idea, or, an impact project. I sort of arrived at podcasts as it seemed like a way to get it out there. In some ways, I almost don't see what I'm doing as a podcast compared to a lot of the other podcasts. It's more like a show that just happens to be distributed on podcast platforms. But
it's absolutely a podcast. I mean, it's very, very informative. I think the subject matter that you talk about is super helpful, knowledge, information. But I interrupted you.
Yeah, so that's kind of the idea, is that now I have so yeah, I can do it without worrying about monetizing it, and it's not pointing off to another business and that kind of thing. And I have decided to try to avoid ads, but I do, solicit, or at least give the opportunity for people to contribute if they want to. And I have, had thankfully, a number of patrons that help at least keep the cost manageable. But I certainly don't see it as a path. I'm not looking at it as a path to sort of, produce a huge secondary income. But those patrons are certainly nice to help offset the cost. Sure.
And we're in a world where there is a lot of conversation, and we're in a world where broadcast media is kind of on its way out. Commercial broadcast, we're on YouTube for a very real reason. There are more viewers on YouTube right now than all of probably cable combined. But they're looking at different channels and different sources. It's just like the future of cable. Where is that? What is the point of this whole thing? Do you notice that as the market share for broadcast media diminishes? Do you notice more of a polarization going to effect to get more views from that media?
Well, I certainly, I think that there's been recent polling saying, that the percentage that people are finding podcasts and things like podcasts. I think for many people that means YouTube. They don't really, it's like they don't differentiate. But that they find that those sources of information more trustworthy than some of these traditional media sources. That's kind of a switch, right? Yep. So that's something that's out there. And I think, to your question about media, I'm not sure about the traditional media. I'm not sure I completely understand it, because there is a question about
their market share, the viewers. There's 5 million viewers watching NBC, Fox News, CNN. It's teeny tiny compared to the amount of viewers on YouTube. Or
even just one like Joe Rogan show, right? I mean, he's got more viewers.
Joe Rogan has more viewers, and has more issues too. I mean, because he doesn't. Right. He's an entertainment show. He doesn't have fact checkers.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. And that's part of the challenge is obviously we're faced with this challenge of good information and finding the good. I mean, there's lots of good information out there, even among mainstream, whatever. I don't even like that term, but sort of traditional media. There is good journalism out there, particularly written journalism, but it can get lost in the garbage, right? So that's the big challenge that we're often faced with. And that's even worse in these social media platforms. But yeah, I mean, that's one reason why I did what I'm doing with the podcast, because we can go more in depth. I can do a half hour or even longer, more instead of a 5-minute, 2-minute snippet or a 5-minute snippet. We can get pretty in depth without it becoming one of these 2.5 hour long academic to academic. My show is more, makes this information more accessible and interpretable by just an average person. So you don't have to be a total science geek to watch to listen to my show and get something out of it.
Form. You've got shorter form. You get right to the point. I mean, I think the algorithm will love you eventually. The way you do your podcast, I think trimming up all of the extra, like our podcast is extra, whereas you really get to the point. Well, and we're not at the point where we can, we use AI to cut our shorts. I mean, I just don't have that kind of time to focus on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm putting a lot of time in editing, right?
Yeah, you're editing, and that you're like you get to the purpose right away. And I think that is what will give your podcast success, and the long term. Who does your accountability? I mean, I do my best to keep Bill accountable, but it's not easy. I guess. It's not. How do you find a source, and what is a source? I know you don't cover news, but you definitely cover information.
Yeah, so part of it's a challenge. I am taking journalism school at Michigan State. Go Spartans.
Nice.
But it's a challenge. And so one piece of that is I do have a partnership with the Connors Institute, which is out of Shippensburg University. And part of that, staying part of that network or that keeping that relationship requires me to, they check me on, am I providing quality information? That's part of our mission, right? We're trying to provide quality, factual, and nonpartisan information. So I'm checked from them to a degree. I'm a member of some, accountability groups where I try to do that. And I have a network of folks that try to help me out with that somewhat as well, right? So I have folks across the political spectrum that can check me to see if I'm, maybe carrying this too far or something like that, or brought in too much of my own bias and things like that. So I have that. But yeah, it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. I mean, I take that responsibility really, really seriously.
What do you think about that Ground network? I might be wrong about, or it's like there's
Ground News. I think it's Ground News.
Is that what it is? Have you heard of them?
I mean, I know a little bit about them, but not a lot.
Do you think that this curated news spectrum, where like they cover all the stories and like do some kind of thing to make it more legitimate? I don't know. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I don't know as much about that one, but there are a few other folks working in this space, and there's kind of two general directions, right? So one is human curators, journalists and just people trained on not necessarily fact checking, but like critical thinking and journalism practices. And one of those is called 1440 News. It's basically a newsletter that curates various. They write some of their own little short stories, but mostly they're curating stuff that's out there. So they're taking a New York Times story here, a Wall Street Journal story there, but they've sort of looked at it and said, okay, this one is pretty reasonable within the constraints of what they're looking for. It's pretty good, but that one's human curated, right? Then there's another one called Other Web. I did an episode about these two, kind of comparing and contrasting. Other Web is basically an AI tool that is letting you create a curated news feed based on the types of stuff you're interested in. So you sort of fill out these polls and check all these boxes for what you want to see in your feed, and it creates a curated news feed that way. And in the future, I think there is some opportunity for AI to do more of this. I think AI has an opportunity to do things like maybe check logic, right? Like maybe they could actually look at articles and say, there's 3 logical fallacies, forgetting whether the facts are accurate or not. There's like leaps and bounds of logical fallacy here to look at, to know about, like as you're reading this article. I think there's opportunity for AI to play a positive role in this, and there's obviously lots of opportunity for AI to play negative roles in this, and it already is to some degree filling us with nonsense. But it's not all bad. AI could play a positive role in some of this, but there's those two, and there's another one people like, and I'm also a subscriber of this, is something called Tangle. It's like your hair is tangled, right, or tangled knot. And it's not even spelled a weird way. I think it's spelled like the actual word. Like it actually has an E at the end, I think. Like you always get the internet version of spellings, right? They leave the vowels out. But anyway, I think this one's spelled normal. And it's Isaac Saul and a team. And they do, and it's a little bit, it's not going to be for everybody because, it's mostly about news facts. So it's not doing a lot of the sort of deeper analysis of what's going on in some larger geopolitical picture. It's taking something that has been in the news recently, and what they do is they collect, what the right is saying, what the left is saying, and then their own take, right? So Isaac Saul and his team's take on it and like what they think. So it gives you those perspectives, and it's not going to be for everybody because some people are going to hear things they don't like. And if you're going to cancel because every once in a while you hear a thing you don't like, it's not for you, right? It's not the right platform because you're going to hear stuff you don't always agree with. And there's another one called Flipside. That is even a little more aggressive about, and they don't do their own. They just do what the left is saying, what the right is saying on a topic. And there's a few others, but those are some of the most recognizable ones. I haven't put as much, and there's also, of course, there's Twitter. What's the thing that is community notes? There's also Twitter community notes, which hasn't been shut down and is still there, but it's got a very small. It doesn't have that. I think. It's still only got a few 100,000 participants or something like that. And so not a lot of stuff is being checked by Community Notes. But I think Community Notes is actually a very interesting, it was started by the prior folks at Twitter, but it has not been shut off yet, and it still exists. I think the Community Notes idea is actually promising, where because of the way they do it, they frame it. I'm trying to remember the language they use, but it's not like this article is a lie or this article is not factual. It's like readers have contributed additional context. So then the way that stuff gets into Community Notes is it only gets in if it's a weird algorithm about you have to have disagreed with other types of similar content so many times. Enough people have had to disagree on this, on the position you're taking enough times before your content shows up. So in other words, it's not always just going to be an echo chamber. Your stuff is only going to get there if you haven't always taken the same position over and over and over again, that kind of thing. So I think Community Notes is a potentially promising thing. But like I say, what makes you kind of wonder about it is not enough people participate, right? So you don't, because it's work, right? I got to be a curator now, right? Yeah. And I got to have a thoughtful thing that may not get posted because I may not fit the algorithm right. So, but I think it's somewhat promising, but I don't know enough about the ground news one to really make a solid judgment.
I mean, I've just been advertised to it occasionally when I'm not on my YouTube Premium. They're like, "Oh, you like news? You know,
Right.
This is what you
Right.
should do. You need to." And part of the reason I like this podcast, just to say that we're great, is I feel like we are asking the source. You guys are the source to me of what is happening. We try not to go outside of expertise and punditry, which is probably a word that is going to get a shadow banned at this point.
Right.
John, do you have any thoughts of where you are when you curate your people? Is there an accountability at all for the what you're trying to show and share? I mean, it seems like an honesty is your goal when creating.
Yeah. That is the goal.
Profile.
Yeah, when putting together their portfolios, it's about really diving into them as a human being. It's really about pulling out their genuine qualities. We're not trying to put a smoke screen out there. If there are certain people, there are certain experts out there, and they're the types that'll rent the mansion and get the photos in front of that, or they'll rent a fleet of Bugattis and pretend that they own them, or the private planes and all that stuff. And the people that I work with, they make fun of those types of people. So, but there's definitely a lot of that within the, subject matter expert space. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and I choose to actively not take part in any of that kind of stuff. When I first kind of started working with these types of folks, I came in and was introduced to those types of folks, and I quickly realized that was not my cup of tea. So I do my best to sniff out that kind of thing and walk away from it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I lived in LA for a long time, and it seems like you pull up in the fancy car, and people will, even if the car is rented, they're going to think of you as a certain way, but you're still meeting at Starbucks and having the conversation out of office, and it's like, if you're not honest with yourself and what you're marketing and what your point is, you're not going to be able to do the job.
Right. Well, perception is reality. And when it comes to putting together a visual brand, how do you want to be perceived by your audience? And for some people, it's be themselves, and they need help identifying how to translate that through their visuals. And for others, it's put on a show, build the biggest audience possible, and sell them a bunch of crap. I mean, it's a choice. It's a choice that a lot of these folks, all of these folks, have to make. And, then it's my choice whether or not I want to engage those people based on the decision that they've made. And for me, my decision is clear. I want to stick with the people who want to be real with the folks that they want to help.
Mm. Well, I think I could talk to you guys for another hour. I certainly, I'm very fascinated with the subject of journalism and marketing, and it's something that we're not going to solve today or tomorrow by any means. And there's a lot of rabbit holes that we could go down, but I want to ask you both one more question. What's next for you, John? What is next on the on the profile, social media, yeah, with your business model. What are you excited about?
That is a great question, because I've been trying to figure out what the hell that looks like for the past year. The one thing that I am certain of is to continue on the path of where I am, which is working with these amazing people that do superhuman things to me, because they are experts in what they do, and just serve them in the way that I do. And my goal is to figure out how I can continue to provide value to them without the camera in my hand. And that is something that I will be thinking very long and hard about over the next year. And hopefully something will be unearthed in that process, and we'll just keep the train rolling and keep moving in that direction.
Excellent. And David, similar question. I'm going to be a little more specific. So we got future outrage. You know, there's a debt default, there's crypto, there's dissolved retirements, potentially ending Medicaid. What is the future outrage that you expect to be talking about in the next coming months?
Well, on the main show, I don't really talk about that often, news items, trending topic kind of thing. So it's a little bit bigger picture than that. It's like a little bit out of that. I do another weekly show I do with my wife.
Yeah.
I do another weekly show with my wife where we do kind of, it's called This Week in Outrage, where we do actually kind of go over that kind of stuff. So that's what we're talking about. But But for the main show, the direction I'm going in next, or where I'm kind of taking things, looking at taking things, it's really, we've always focused on it some, but I really want to bring out make this clear to folks that a piece of what we're trying to do is help people build resilience to all that stuff. Like if it maybe doesn't go your way, building some resilience to all that. So that's one area. Another big area that I'll be looking at is, and I'll be expanding topics a bit. So, I've talked a lot with a lot of social scientists, psychologists, and others about a lot of these, this phenomenon, so various psychological phenomenon, things like that. And we'll still do that, but I'll be expanding a bit more. I'm going to bring in more of my tech side. So we are going to talk sort of technology and outrage a bit more. I'm also going to expand even more of that, more personal stories about folks that have maybe stories that relate in some way to this kind of outrage industry environment we're in, the outrage overload, the outrage exhaustion, all that stuff. So it might be, for example, I spoke with somebody who has blindness and aphantasia where they can't visualize. And so what that episode's about really is kind of empathy, right? Which is what we all need to a degree, right? So it's like, if you can't understand that other people, like you can't visualize, you have to kind of visualize with words that other people can visualize. And like, you have face blindness, you don't even recognize the same person 20 minutes later that you just met. You have there's a lot of parts about that that require deep empathy to deal with, right? So that's what that episode is really more about, right? But that empathy then carries over to these other situations in political polarization and arguments and stuff like that, right? So just as an example of how I'd be expanding topics a little bit broader. But then another big thing I'm going to do this year, because it's what I've found so far as really effective in this space. Whereas we talked before about social media doesn't always get you the results you want and things like that. One thing I am going to do is a lot more collaboration, right? So obviously stuff like this and going on shows is great, but I've established one of the big sort of side benefits of doing this show now for 2 years and 100 and something interviews I've done, is I've established this whole network of folks that will, sort of take my email and respond, and kind of a network of experts and practitioners in the space, and leaders of some of these organizations. There are like 8,000 organizations out there kind of working in this bridge building, depolarizing space. So I have established relationships with a ton of them. So the big piece there is to try to do more collaboration with those groups, because it's one of those things, we all say it, like we talk and we say, oh, we need to do something together. And then like, you don't do it, right? So now this is the year where we're going to actually try to follow up and make more of that happen.
Well, good. And we always end up, and we'll give you guys the last word on with a joke or a riddle or a saying of some kind. If you have anything like that, David, do you have anything to end off, or either one of you?
Well, the joke that I have is really dirty, but it was told by one of the Golden Girls to Betty White, and so it's floating around. And you may have seen it. So I don't know what'll happen on your YouTube channel. I mean, it's already on YouTube. I think I saw it on Instagram. I'll do kind of a short version of it, right? But so there's a guy. He's on a deserted island with a pig and a dog. You with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's been on the island for a while, and the pig is starting to look kind of attractive, right? So he sort of starts to pet the pig a little bit and talk to it. Well, the dog gets really jealous and starts growling and biting at him. So he has to let that go. Like a month later, dog's asleep. Oh, now's my chance. He goes to the pig and starts kind of, petting the pig, and dog wakes up, and growls and, wants to bite him again. Oh man, he's got to let that go. After a while, this gorgeous woman, lands at on the deserted island. And he's like, thank God, can you help me out? Will you hold this dog?
John, did you have anything to add to that?
I was stuck with the pig. I can't follow that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Well,
think of the Golden Girls lady telling that joke, right?
oh yeah, it's brilliant.
I love the Golden Girls.
It's brilliant. Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you for being a part of this week's Geeky Gamer Podcast with Ken and Bill. Bill is on the way to the hospital, so that's exciting, and we hope that he gets better soon, and I'll be checking in with him. All the lowercase letters in Mr. Interrupt are do the music, as well as Couchfire Media does some production. Trois Replay Productions is a really difficult thing to say, and they do everything else. So thank you, John and David, for being a part of this podcast. Please come back sometime soon, and we will talk again. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.